In business today, three things to know. First, terror threat severe. The UK sounds the alarm on the threat from ISIS on the British homeland. What the Prime Minister had to say and the UK's response. Then, can Russia be stopped in Ukraine? As NATO members prepare for a summit next week, what additional sanctions could be on the table? And Americans are hitting the road for the last unofficial weekend of summer. We'll run down Labor Day activities. Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. The UK is entering the weekend on edge following the raising of the terrorist threat level to severe, the second highest level, which means that an attack is, quote, likely, though not necessarily imminent. Citing terrorist actions in Iraq and Syria, British Prime Minister David Cameron says the threat by ISIS is now, quote, greater and deeper to UK security than any threat before it. The Islamic State has been on a campaign of terror through both countries as it aims to create a new Islamic country. Here's a little of what the Prime Minister had to say.
The root cause of this threat to our security is quite clear. It is a poisonous ideology of Islamist extremism that is condemned by all faiths and by all faith leaders. It believes in using the most brutal forms of terrorism to force people to accept a warped worldview and to live in an almost medieval state.
The White House also commenting. Press Secretary Josh Earnest briefed reporters this afternoon in Washington.
This is a threat that the United States has been focused on. We've been coordinating closely with our allies, both the Brits but others in Europe, about countering this threat and mitigating it.
Arise News contributor Eric Ham now joins us from Washington, D.C. And Eric, the United States and the UK certainly have different positions of rhetoric here, with the UK really focusing on a threat to their land. What do you think is driving that from the British Prime Minister? Eric? Does Eric hear us in Washington?
I think what's driving this is you've got nearly 500 to 900 jihadists who've actually gone from Europe to Iraq. And so I think now what the Prime Minister is doing is he's actually letting people know that this threat is more serious and more real, particularly for the West, than we've actually come to accept.
And Eric, what do you think is going to then be
And so I think that's the issue that
Eric, what do you think, therefore, is going to be the immediate fallout from this decision, specifically as it possibly relates to any financial transactions through Europe?
Well, right now, you got to understand, Europe is actually reeling, we've still had the Eurozone crisis, and now you've got this threat. So I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a hunker-down mentality. We don't know if a threat is imminent or if it's likely. We don't know if we know that a number of jihadists have traveled to Iraq, but we don't know what's actually happening on the ground. So I think the markets could end up very shaky over the next few days as we wait to see exactly if there's more intelligence or more details coming forward on what exactly is to transpire at this point.
And the British are being a little bit tight-lipped about what specific intelligence information they have here, correct? They're not saying that there's a threat that is imminent, but clearly there is something that has made them take this action.
Exactly, because they said that we don't have anything specific, but to actually raise the level to this degree suggests that there's something in the pipeline. And so I think, and like I said, I think what's very key about this is you've got Prime Minister Cameron, who's letting people know that this threat is imminent to the homeland, which I think makes it very real, very serious, not just for London or for the UK, but for the rest of Europe as well.
Do you think this announcement caught the White House a little bit off guard? Because the White House has been talking about the threat in the Middle East, and now our closest ally is saying the threat is much closer to home.
Exactly, because when you listen to President Obama speak about this issue, he talks about ISIS in Iraq, and so he talks about the threat in Iraq or to the Middle East, but he's never been able to, I think, adequately capture what this threat may mean for the United States or for America directly. And so it's almost like you've got Prime Minister Cameron and President Obama talking past one another, because Prime Minister Cameron is now letting us know that this is a threat to the homeland, whereas President Obama makes it clear it's a threat to Iraq.
And Eric, on a much more serious topic that the press secretary reported on a little bit earlier and mentioned, you and I are both on board with the Obama fashion statement here in the tan jackets today.
Bravo.
I think Josh began the press conference very well today by setting everybody up on that. Thank you so much from Washington, D.C. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Take care.
Turning now to the markets. The markets finished up with a fourth straight weekly gain. In fact, it is the best August for the S&P 500 in 14 years. Here are the final numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closing up 1888 to 17,098. The S&P 500 up 6 and change. That's a record, 2,337 is the S&P 500 just marching forward, and the NASDAQ up 22 to 45,8027. Commodities, really important to watch commodities here as the sort of international situation becomes unsettled, because you usually get a flight to quality. Gold, considered that. Gold moving down today, but we should be watching the gold numbers over the next week. Oil seeing a little bit of a pop, because anytime there's unsettled news in the Middle East, you're going to start to see some increases in oil. Oil up to 95.89, but still way off of its highs for the year. Coming up, NATO faces the Russian challenge. We'll preview next week's summit. You're watching Arise Exchange.
If I was building my own news network, first thing I think I'd want high-quality reporters, very educated, intelligent people.
Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime.
I'm Julian Phillips.
I'm Wendy Gillette.
I'm Sophia Songhai.
I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey. Thank you for joining us here in New York City.
I would like to see more people of color represented in high positions in media.
We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well.
People need to understand the problems that are going on in the community are much closer than we actually think they are.
Kayla Phillips is one of the shoppers who is suing Barney's, and she is here with her attorney. What is it that you want from them?
Not to judge every African-American person that comes in your store.
A lot of international news today. NATO is stepping up its rhetoric against Russia's military action in Ukraine ahead of the NATO summit next week. NATO's chief called on Russia to halt what he calls its illegal actions.
We condemn in the strongest terms Russia's continued disregard of its international obligations. We urge Russia to cease its illegal military actions, stop its support to armed separatists, and take immediate and verifiable steps toward de-escalation of this grave crisis.
James Blue, our Washington bureau chief, now joins us on the phone. And James, the big news is that Ukraine wants to join NATO. Why now? And that is going to cause a problem for NATO, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the idea of joining NATO now is that Russia has really crossed the line, and Ukraine wants to put its eggs in the West basket. And you will remember, Andrew, the whole struggle between Russia and Ukraine came up over the Ukrainian vote to join the European Union. And so the desire to join NATO is really the desire to tilt to the West and to get the protection that NATO offers. As you know, NATO's Article 5, if any NATO member country is attacked, it is considered an attack on the entire NATO alliance, all the countries in NATO, and that's the protection Ukraine is seeking.
And that's why NATO can't accept this, right? Because it's one thing to call for sanctions, but it's another thing to join NATO, because then we're going to be at war.
Clearly, there are folks who believe that some type of escalation and some type of confrontation with Russia is imminent. There is a briefing by the National Security Council at the White House today, and the real purpose of this trip is to try to de-escalate and to try to calm things down. They are keeping open the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. Yes, it would, in its current form, create a lot of problems and potentially put NATO and Russia at odds and potentially at war with each other. But at this point, the White House is saying, let's explore it, let's see where it goes, and let's sort of work with Ukraine and all the partners in the area to try to find some type of peaceful solution.
Maybe there's sort of a NATO light resolution that they could have here. What kind of sanctions do you think may come out of the summit?
Well, I think there won't be necessarily sanctions out of the NATO summit because it's the military alliance, although I think you will potentially see from the EU member states bans on SWIFT transfers from Russia. Now, this is the sanction that really brought Iran to its knees and got Iran to the bargaining table. As you know, SWIFT is the system through which international banking transfers are made around the world. And so if SWIFT transfers are banned from Russia, that means they have very limited means to move money in and out, and that hurts.
But so far, the sanctions haven't had the desired effect, clearly, and have just done more to anger Russia. So it's a question of how far you think they're going to go here.
Yes, and you know, Andrew, the sanctions have not been as painful, but they are having some impact, specifically on the energy sector and on the sort of military armament sector. There is Angela Merkel, the leader of Germany, is really trying to work with both Russia and Ukraine, trying to come up with some middle ground. But with Vladimir Putin sending troops into another area of Ukraine just yesterday, it seems very, bleak. How do you actually come up with a solution that satisfies all parties? Okay,
James, I assume that you're wearing a tan suit even though you're on the phone, because that was the dress code for everybody here today.
The dress code is tan, and I'm complying.
James Fu in Washington. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Time now for our business ticker stories making headlines across the nation. Bank of America is asking a federal judge to dismiss a $1.27 billion penalty for the bank's Hustle program. B of A says the evidence at the trial did not support the 2013 verdict. A jury found that the bank misled Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac into purchasing faulty loans. The judge at that time said Bank of America's high-speed swim lane, also known as Hustle for short, was an instrument for brazen fraud. Malaysian Airlines undergoing some big changes after 2 crashes. The airliner will cut 6,000 jobs. That's almost a third of its workforce as part of a $2 billion restructuring plan after the 2 disasters this year. The company will also be taken over entirely by the state. That's the plan. Malaysian Airlines has lost 2 planes. One disappeared en route to China. The other was shot down over Ukraine. The shooting death of an unarmed man in Ferguson has proven to be a boon for one company. Digital Ally, which makes wearable cameras, has experienced a 400% stock gain after extending a contract with Michigan State Police. And a pop-up coffee shop, just like the one featured on the old TV sitcom Friends, is opening up in New York City next month. It's a joint venture between Warner Brothers, the maker of the show, and 8 O'Clock Coffee to mark the 20th anniversary of the much-beloved NBC program. The replica store in Soho, named Central Perk, just like the one on Friends, will be open for 1 month starting September 17th and will serve up free coffee. And the ALS Foundation isn't the only one benefiting from the Ice Bucket Challenge. The viral video craze has also boosted sales of, well, ice. Haley Platt reports.
Another celebrity takes up the Ice Bucket Challenge. Actor Benedict Cumberbatch is soaking, adding valuable funds to a needy charity. The craze, which started in the US, has spread around the globe, inspiring everyone from former presidents and politicians to ordinary citizens. It's raised $80 million in the States and more than $3.3 million in the UK. Belinda Cupid is from Britain's Motor Neurone Disease Association.
This kind of money will mean that we'll have a lot more opportunities, perhaps to accelerate the research. It will open up new partnerships for us to develop research.
But the craze has also given an unexpected boost to business. Sales of ice cubes are up 20% at the Ice Company, Britain's largest supplier. UK supermarket giant Tesco is a customer. It sold more than 36 million ice cubes in the last week alone, far more than normal. Tesco has given some of the extra cash to charity in the form of a £20,000 donation. It's calling on others to do the same, as the craze shows no sign of abating.
The ice was so cold in the bucket, it took my breath away when my granddaughter poured it all over my head.
I've been nominated, so I'll be doing it this evening.
Are you looking forward to it?
It's going to be cold.
And it's not just the money that's important.
Certainly for the volunteers and people living with motor neurone disease, it can become very boring to have to say time and time again, I've got motor neurone disease. It leaves me without the ability to walk, talk and feed myself. And you have to say that again and again. And so for them, it means that people will know what motor neurone disease is.
Alan Germain.
It also shows how social media is increasingly becoming a valuable money-making tool.
Check into a hotel these days and you better bring your checkbook. You're being charged not just for the room, but for everything from use of the pool to refrigerators. In fact, extra fees have helped improve the bottom line of hotels by increasing revenue this year by 6%. And earlier this week, we spoke with hotel business expert Bjorn Hansen. Thank you for coming to Arise Exchange. We know this from the airline industry. Are the hotels taking a page out of that business?
Well, hotels started first. I started an annual report on hotel fees in 1987. And the trend has been upward ever since, a few setbacks in years with low occupancy. But right now, the airlines are almost providing great cover for hotels because the airline fees are even less popular.
And no one likes the hotel.
Right.
And no one likes the airlines, as we've just discovered.
Actually, hotels have become the high point of travel. It used to be the air travel, but now it's the hotel.
Okay, so some of the fees that you should expect to pay then when you go into the hotels?
If it's a resort, almost every resort now is charging a resort fee.
What does that mean, a resort fee?
Well, it used to be, say, $12 a day per room, and that would allow guests to use the swimming pool and have towels and use the putting green and the tennis courts and things. Those can be now as much as $60 per day per guest for the use of those services. Do people
know that? Because when I look at a hotel online, I've always figured all of that stuff just comes with the price of the room.
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons why some guests are disturbed. I think the lodging industry has become very good at disclosing the information, but it may be that it's kind of mentioned when the reservation is placed. It may be some small print on the e-confirmation that's received. But
I remember you used to never use the minibar because you get hammered in the minibar. People know that, and I kind of wondered why the hotels even had them there anymore because people kind of figured that out. But they're just charging for certain things in the rooms now, whether you use them or not.
Right. More and more that is the case. Now, some urban hotels are starting to charge the equivalent of a resort fee, and that would be to receive incoming overnight packages, for faxes to come in, for use of local telephone calls, and those types of things.
For hailing you a cab on the street?
Right. That probably still justifies a gratuity for the bell staff or the doorman.
So how important are these fees to the hotel industry? We know in the airline industry that bag fees, for example, are a major driver of profits and revenue.
They're important to the lodging industry, but not the same as with the airline industry. These revenues represent about 2% of the revenue in the industry, but about 5% of the profits. So they're, again, not insignificant, but also they're very nice to have.
But is it true that you're automatically paying these fees, or is there an a la carte option here? For example, if you don't want to use the swimming pool and you're not using some of the resort things, are these fees automatically baked in? Or is it a la carte?
For the resort fee, it really is all guests are paying for the availability of the services. There are other charges, though, and you mentioned the mini bar. So it may be that a can of soda is $3.95, but there is a restocking fee for the first item taken out of the mini bar per day, and that could be $2.95 to $5.95. So that's really on a per-use basis.
Are there any laws that require hotels to disclose these fees?
The government sent out a notice last year to most of the major brands alerting them to be better at disclosing automatic fees, so not usage kinds of fees, but those things that are charged automatically. The lodging industry was already getting to be much better at disclosure, but again, some guests don't read the tent cards that are on the minibar, don't look at the room service menu, the small print on the bottom about
Well, you know, if they're
tray
not going to read
charge.
that, then you can't read the bill when you're starting to book it. Are we seeing, you know, we're seeing the rise in major cities of hotels like Yotel, which are sort of pay-as-you-go kind of hotels. Are there certain types of hotels that charge more fees than others?
Full-service hotels have more opportunity to charge for fees and surcharges. That's also kind of interesting. Luxury hotels have the highest propensity to charge for high-speed internet access, whereas less expensive hotels, which are typically franchise kinds of brands, almost all include high-speed internet access.
I noticed that. I went to San Diego. I stayed in this little Ramada motel, free internet service. I went to the Marriott Marquis, $400 a night. They will charge me $19 a day for the Wi-Fi.
Right.
Bjorn Hansen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Coming up, a mom and principal from a Christian school need a come-to-Jesus moment. They are our favorite people of the day. You're watching Rise Exchange.
If I was building my own network, it would be for the people, by the people. It would be very diverse. It would be with every culture you can think of.
If I was to start my own news network, it would reflect positive and negative within the continents and the countries around the world.
I think that I would be more looking towards young people.
If I were to build my own news network, it would look like New York City. Old, young, fresh, hip, classic.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and diverse.
If I was to build my own news network, my own world network, I would love a correspondent in every country, every location, every city. I mean, it's kind of unrealistic, but how cool would it be to get local stories from the impoverished country, the impoverished city that we don't know about?
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, and not so much for the right reasons. Today, it is a principal of a private Christian school in Callahan, Florida, who expelled a preschooler because his mom criticized the school on her Facebook page. The mom is also our favorite person because she's clearly a religious parent from hell. Ashley Habit, who is the mom of 4-year-old Will, was angry at administrators at the Sunshine Christian Academy for the way they provided notice about Picture Day at the school. So she took to Facebook, where she posted a not-so-Christian thought, writing, quote, "Why is it that every single day there is something new I dislike about Will's school? Are my standards really too high, or are people working in education fields really just that ignorant?" Well, the principal of the religious school, Lori Johnson, there she is, also did the not-so-Christian thing and punished the mom by tossing little Will out the door and expelling him from school. The mom said, the school said the mom, quote, sowed discord at the school, which is a violation of school policy, but poor little Will is being taken away from his friends, all because his mom wrote a somewhat dumb Facebook post. You'd think God would want both the school and mom to work it out and say, you know, forgive each other. That's kind of the Christian thing to do. Habit for being a high-maintenance mom and Lori Johnson for being a thin-skinned principal are our favorite people of the day. Coming up next, where Americans are going for the Labor Day weekend. It is 5 o'clock somewhere here on a Rise Exchange. It is also this week the 50th birthday of Gary Anthony Ramsey, who is line producing our show today. Happy birthday, Gary.
Looking at mainstream news stations where only you have a very small minority of people of color being newscasters and actually having prominent roles in the media.
In a newsroom in the United States, maybe 10% of decision makers come from communities of diversity. That's not right.
Well, diversity is important because the more complete the news is, the more accurate a picture you're getting of the world, and the more you can form an accurate opinion of things.
The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people like me, people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
the great things about Arise News, it is truly a multicultural global channel that is paying attention to communities of all different kinds, not just here in the United States, not just in Africa, but all around the world. As we're giving a voice to the people that don't traditionally have the kind of a voice that a mass media organization can have. You're getting here at Arise News that you're not going to find at the other networks is a unique perspective, and I think that's part of what Arise is here to do.
AAA expects more Americans to get away this Labor Day than last year, and many of us, of course, will be driving, helped in part by lower gas prices. Robert Sinclair, media manager with AAA in New York, is on the phone with a preview. Robert, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit about what you expect as far as Americans on the road this year compared to other years.
Well, this year, nearly 35 million will be traveling, and that's up about 1.5% compared to last year. And the numbers are the highest since 2008, when the Great Recession hit, and it forced many families to curtail their vacations or forego them completely. But all this has to be given with the caveat that, we're nowhere near back in the good old days of 2008 when 45 million people traveled. And, it's kind of a mirror of the economy. It's moving ahead in fits and starts, and we're seeing the numbers increase year to year, but in fits and starts, 500,000 here and 100,000 there. When people travel, they need money, but when they travel, they spend money. So it's kind of a circular relationship, but we're seeing that with income growth stagnant and consumer spending up, we're speculating that people are dipping into their credit cards to be able to afford this last hurrah of the summer.
Yeah, we've seen consumer debt certainly skyrocket this summer. Overall, for the summer, how has, driving been, basically? Have we seen increase across the board for all of the summer holidays, July 4th, Memorial Day?
Yeah, that's been the case, but it's only been like a percentage or two higher than the previous year. And again, fits and starts, it's growing, and the motor vehicle is the overwhelming method of choice to get to a destination. Anywhere from 85 to 90% of summer trips are made by the car. Gives you the flexibility to go wherever you want to go, and you'll have transportation when you get there. And most of our members tell us that if their trip is 1,000 miles or more, they'll fly, but if it's 1,000 miles or less, they're going to drive.
Really? A lot of people are driving for less than 1,000 miles? I mean, that's 10, 12 hours on the road.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you drive like me, then it's like 7.
And unless there's no traffic around you. But we do say that the holiday starts on a Thursday, and we've noticed that when Labor Day starts in August, we get more people. But yeah, a lot of folks will drive 500, 600, 700, 800 miles.
Where do people
think twice about it?
Yeah. Where do people tend to go from their homes? Is it high-end vacation spots when they go with the family? Is it camping? What sort of does the vacation look like these days?
Well, overwhelmingly, it's friends and families. Then it's followed by attractions like that big place in Florida with the character with the big ears, national parks, beaches, amusement parks, that sort of thing. But friends and family overwhelmingly. And when people do travel over this holiday, though, it's not high-end. We tend to look at the 2 and 3 diamond hotels that people take on trips like this. It's not high-end, but our members tell us that the most important thing to them in a hotel when they travel is that it's clean. And you certainly can get that with a 2 or 3 diamond property, even though it's slightly more expensive compared to last year. About $125 a night for a 2-diamond hotel and $151 a night for a 3-diamond. But that's generally enough for a Labor Day weekend.
And sites like TripAdvisor are terrific, by the way, at determining hotels. Do you see, I mean, it's a little bit of a curveball, but do you see that when people buy new cars, they're more likely to travel with them, like show off the new car? Is there any correlation?
Yeah, well, we see a lot of new car sales in the spring. That's prime new car buying season. People will buy a new car and immediately hit the road. And I'm sure you know that we're on par this year to sell between 16 and 17 million cars. The money is cheap. You see a lot of 0.9 financing and 0% financing. And, it's almost back to the good old days. I remember 2005. I think we sold 17.5 million cars in this country. So we're getting back there as far as new car sales are concerned. I bought one myself this year. and can't wait to take it on a long trip.
We have about 30 seconds left, and I want to just ask you about the condition of the roads. Infrastructure projects, of course, have been on the increase because of various federal programs. How important is that, and are the roads in good shape generally? And I know it's a broad comment.
Nah, the roads are in terrible shape. The overall infrastructure is in bad shape in this country. Depending on where you are, you might see 50 to 60% of the roads in fair or poor condition, and a third of the bridges are functionally obsolete or structurally deficient. We at AAA think we need a modest increase in the gasoline tax in order to pay for infrastructure improvements, to fully fund the Federal Highway Fund, the Federal Highway Trust Fund. But nobody wants to seem to talk about that.
All right, Robert Sinclair, media manager with AAA. Have a very good weekend.
Thanks. You do the same.
The markets are closed on Monday, so tune in for a special Arise Xchange Labor Day. We will be back on Tuesday. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Have a very good and safe Labor Day. See you on Tuesday.